In the midst of the forest, the family carved out a humble living, and in the midst of the farmyard sits an elegant Savu sauna. Michael Nordskog describing the Hanka Homestead sauna in his book, The Opposite of Cold.
Hello, this is Daniel, and welcome back to the Sauna Trail podcast. Join us in our adventures as we share the story of how our family discovered the world of Finnish sauna. You might be wondering why anyone would do a podcast dedicated to something as commonplace as sauna. It's like doing a podcast about rugs or birch trees or chapstick. Well, if you stick around, you might find out that there's more to sauna than you realized. Today's episode continues our adventures in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We'll be sharing about a second historical sauna site we visited, a few more culinary gems we discovered, a beautiful walk we took at a nature sanctuary, and another sauna experience on the west side of the Keweenaw Peninsula.
One thing we forgot to mention in last week's episode was what happened with the wood-burning sauna Facebook group. At Victoria Restoration, we took some 360-degree photos of their sauna and posted it in the wood-burning sauna Facebook group. Another Facebook page called Yooper Pasty shared that post. Yooper Pasty currently has over 170,000 followers. I'm not sure how many they had in 2016, but it was probably not too far from that. All of a sudden, while on this trip, we kept getting notifications of Yoopers joining the wood-burning sauna group, and that's when it really started to take off. Pops will do a deep dive into the wood-burning sauna group and share some of his favorite posts and things we've learned over the years from fellow sauna enthusiasts. That'll be coming up in the next few weeks, so stay tuned for that.
Today we'll start with another historic sauna site. Hanka Homestead is featured in The Opposite of Cold, but I hadn't read through the whole book at this point and didn't know much about it, really. We were eating at a restaurant and somehow started talking to strangers about sauna, which often happens with us. They mentioned that we should check out Hanka Homestead and gave us the contact information for Tom and Cheryl Tervo, who met us there and showed us the property. Hanka Homestead, the history of it was that Herman Hanka, he claimed a homestead in Iowa back in the day, but ended up moving to Michigan, where there was more of a Finnish community and a familiar environment and mining jobs, which was pretty common for Finnish settlers at that time. So he got a second homestead in the remote area of Misery Bay, but the isolation at Misery Bay and a mining accident, which made him deaf, led to their family trading that homestead for a gun and getting now a third homestead. And this third homestead was near Tapiola, Michigan. His daughter, Mari, filed the claim since Herman couldn't file a second one. They ended up getting two 40-acre plots at this homestead, and they ended up building several log buildings on the site and made this homestead work. They would use their sauna, which was a smoke sauna or Savu sauna, as a deer blind and shoot at deer through the smoke vent. The last of the family ended up dying and the farm became abandoned in 1966. Alan Pape of Superior Restorations purchased the property and started restoring it in 1981. And it was opened 4 years later in 1985 to the public. His full vision was for it to be a site for teaching and learning, farming and traditional crafts. And I think he even maybe wanted it to be a working farm site. Now it's more of just like a museum kind of piece. Here are some 360-degree images we took of their sauna. This first one here is outside. You can see around the property and the different buildings. And then the next one we get closer, we're on the entrance or the porch part of the sauna, the Savu sauna. You can see it's kind of a low entrance. And then this third one, we're inside the Savu sauna with the simple benches and the walls. And you can see the large kiwas, or that was the kind of the hearth heater, which is a big pile of stones.
There's a drying rack of some sort above the kiwas. I wonder if that's original for like smoking things or drying things. And then also there's a wash basin. I don't know if that's, I mean, it looks pretty big, so I don't know if that was actually in there originally. either, but for washing or if that's storage or something else, I don't know. I think during the tour when we went and walked around and saw some of the other buildings, I think Tom or Cheryl. Anyways, he was telling us a story that they had some sort of cold water spring, and that's where they would store milk and keep it cold during the summer all year round. So I thought that was pretty cool.
They also had a pretty deep well on the property, and that was one of the first times I'd seen a well. And so we looked down and saw the water and our reflections, and that was really cool.
So we had a good tour of Hanka Homestead, and a big thank you to Tom and Cheryl for showing us around. And it was cool to see another Savu sauna. I'm trying to remember how many we had seen at this point. We'd visited one the previous year. Any other Savu saunas that we had seen?
We saw the one in Cokato.
Okay, so that would be the second. So I think this was our third Savu sauna.
And it's interesting to me, the doors are always short. I think even the one in Cokato. So that's just something that I've noticed with the Savu saunas. It's interesting.
Yep, helps keep the heat in. So that was an unexpected part of our adventure, but really cool.
Well, speaking of unexpected adventures, Pops, of course, loves to drive around and explore, and Mom's a great co-adventurer because she likes to discover new things too. On one of our driving and exploring days, we found ourselves near a town called Freda. It's actually not located on the Keweenaw Peninsula, but Pop saw it on a map just south and west of the Keweenaw. The fact that it was on the coast piqued his interest enough to warrant a visit.
Yeah, we visited Freda, and we've actually been there a few times. It's not a ghost town, but it's definitely a small town that's out of the way, and it's just at the end of the road, right on the coast, right on the shore of Superior.
Yeah, as we were driving there, we saw a sign that said apple cider. Well, we're suckers for trying new foods on trips, so we pulled into the driveway. We didn't see anyone when we drove up to the house, but as we sat in the car, a woman came out of the house and greeted us. We asked her about the apple cider, and she said the apple cider is made from apples grown on her land. She bottles them in gallon jugs and just sells them from her house. We said we'd like to buy a couple gallons, and she went to go get them. As we were waiting, Pop spotted an octagonal building that looks like it might be a sauna. So, of course, he had to ask about it, and sure enough, it was a sauna. Debbie was super gracious and allowed complete strangers to see the inside of her sauna.
Yeah, Debbie was very gracious and let us go inside. So we didn't take the time or ask her if we could take like an official nice 360 with our camera. So Christopher just took a picture with his phone, and you can see it's kind of hard to tell in this picture, but it is octagonal and the stove is in the middle of the room. And it was so unique because I'd never seen one shaped like that before. There's also a picture of the changing room. So she had a changing room too.
Yeah, I thought that sauna design was pretty unique. And I think it ended up influencing our thinking for when we built our own sauna. We wanted to build seating area that allowed people to kind of sit in that circle. And that kind of also harkens back to the original sauna, which is probably a tent, and you can see reflected in the Native American inipi or sweat lodge practices where you sit around in a circle.
Circling back to the apple cider, we didn't crack into it until we got back to our vacation rental, and it was amazing.
Yeah, she had said that she used apples from her own property, and I think the trees maybe were there before they moved there, and it was just kind of a hodgepodge of different apple trees. And it was just a wonderful mix of kind of tart and sweet and a lot of different flavors. It was some of the best apple cider I've ever had.
It was very good.
I don't remember how the cider was, but I do remember Chutes and Ladders. As you drive north towards the Keweenaw Peninsula in Houghton along the Portage Canal, there's a playground called Chutes and Ladders. We first saw it as we were driving along the road, and we had to check it out. This playground has two of the biggest slides I've ever seen. Slides are part of a huge wooden play area that is set in a gigantic sandhill. It was constructed in the early 1990s and is actually part of a larger park area called Raymond C. Kestner Park that covers over 5 acres along the waterfront. There's an RV park, a swimming area, picnic tables, and bathrooms. We didn't explore the park, we just played at the playground and went down the slides. It was really fun.
Playing around at Chutes and Ladders Park can really work up an appetite. So let's talk about Peterson's Fish Market. Travel north on Highway 41 and you'll see it on the west side of the highway. Peterson's Fish Market also has a restaurant called Four Sons Fish and Chips, but we didn't eat there on this trip. However, we were able to purchase some smoked fish, which was very good. The smoked trout was especially delicious. A few years later, we finally did get to eat at Four Sons Fish and Chips, and everything was quite tasty.
Another roadside discovery we made while driving around and exploring on this trip was the Calumet Brewery ruins. Mom and Pops wanted to get a 360-degree photo inside the ruins, so Mom took her camera equipment and trekked into the ruins. We were waiting and we see this animal come out and we weren't sure what it was. We kind of freaked out and I think it might have been a fox or a wolf. I'm really not sure. And it just kind of stood in the road for a while. And I remember turning on the car alarm repeatedly so that Mom and Pops could come back because I was freaked out. After turning on the car alarm several times and locking all the doors and making sure that this animal didn't come in, Pops came back and it had walked away by then. But it freaked us out and traumatized me for some strange reason.
In the safety of the car.
Yes. Anyhow, back to the Calumet Brewery ruins. It has an interesting history. According to the Keweenaw National Historical Park website, the brewery was opened by two brothers, Joseph and Martin Miswald, in 1897. They previously ran a brewery in Onnonagon out of an old Catholic church, but it was burned down in 1896. When they opened this brewery in Calumet, they sourced water from the brewery creek. During the Prohibition era, they made soft drinks, but eventually they closed down in 1923 due to a decrease in sales and revenue.
It seems like everywhere you go in the Keweenaw, there's something interesting along the roadside. One fun place we discovered and like to visit each year is Haven Falls Park. It's along Gay Loch LaBelle Road towards the northern part of the Keweenaw Peninsula. It's not a huge waterfall, but it's pretty and you can even see the waterfall from your car as you drive. But we always like to get out and stretch our legs. You can climb up along the waterfall on the right side or walk along the base. On this trip, some of us even dipped our toes in the water. And spoiler alert, our extended family eventually joined us in the UP, and you can see all us cousins at the base of the waterfall. That will be a fun episode, so stay tuned to hear what the rest of our family thinks of the UP.
While driving around the Keweenaw Peninsula, it's always nice to stop in little shops and buy snacks. On the northwest side of the peninsula, off Highway 26, we spotted a little shop called Jampot. When you walk in, you'll see shelves which are lined with jams, preserves, coffee, and various baked goods and breads. Then, straight ahead is a counter with more baked goods and the cashier. What surprised us the most was at the cash register and seen through the doorway behind the counter were a couple of monks. They were garbed in the traditional brown and black tunics with long beards and head coverings. We learned that just north of Jampot is a monastery. The items sold at Jampot are made by monks and the proceeds support the Holy Protection Monastery. According to the website, they are, and I quote, a Catholic monastery of the Byzantine Rite under the jurisdiction of the Ukrainian Catholic Eparch of St. Nicholas in Chicago.
Yeah, a bakery run by monks is pretty cool. Pretty much anything run by monks is cool. And a few years later, I actually visit one of their prayer services with my brother and nephew. They don't have a lot of monks that live there. I think their numbers have gone down significantly in the past few years. And we'll link to a documentary about them in the show notes.
Yeah, and the area around Jampot is really beautiful. I love exploring around and looking at the different waterfalls, and the trees around there are huge and really beautiful. One of the other places that we explored in the Keweenaw Peninsula was Copper Harbor and Hunters Point Park. Copper Harbor is a cute little coastal town that has only a few streets. There's a couple restaurants, several lodging options, and a handful of shops there. We visited Jamson's because we had gotten smoked fish from there last year, and this time we got some baked goods and coffee as well. Next door to Jamson's, they also have a souvenir shop called Fisherman's Daughter that's fun to pop in and see what they have whenever we visit. And you can see from this 360-degree photo that Jamson's is right out on the coast there. And not too far from Copper Harbor is Hunters Point Park. It covers 9.4 acres and has 4,800 feet of shoreline. It has a nice loop trail along the coast as well. We went during the fall on this trip, and you can see here the beautiful fall colors. The trees are just glowing red and orange, and it's beautiful.
Before we move on to the sauna and rental, I want to talk about Black Creek Nature Sanctuary and show some pictures that we took on our hike there. Also known as just Black Creek, this sanctuary is located on the west side of the Keweenaw Peninsula and encompasses 242 acres of nature that is protected by the Michigan Nature Association. It also has 1,500 feet of shoreline along Lake Superior. There's about 4.5 miles of walking trails that cross 2 creeks. I forget exactly which part of the trails we walked, but I think we covered most of them. We ended our hike at Lake Superior and walked up the shoreline to our rental.
The sanctuary was really a lovely walk. It was a long walk. It was a long trek for the kids, and I think Daniel was pretty young at the time. He did good. There was so much interesting plants and things growing along the ground. So just tiny little mushrooms and areas where it was covered with this green lichen. So much plant life, such a variety of plant life. And then again, like Becca said, it was fall. So we were walking along, and then all of a sudden came along this glowing yellow tree, which I think we learned is a tamarack tree, and just the deep colors of the reds in the fall. When we finally got to the beach and we ended our walk and we were walking down the shoreline back to our rental, there were a few places where the creek actually came out to the water to Lake Superior, and we had to cross over. And Christopher tried to jump this little crossing. I think he made it. I don't remember him getting super wet. Don't know what Christopher's doing laying on the floor on his stomach. I don't know, maybe this was after the jump and he was like, oh, I'm old. I shouldn't have done that. And then Becca just being Becca. And you can see the water is just beautiful. It was sunset when we finally wrapped up our walk. So we were walking along the water as the sun was setting, the waves along the shore. You know, as a mom, like there's a verse in the Bible where Mary talks about the memories that she has that she treasured these moments of watching Jesus grow up. And I think this walk for me is one of those moments where I really treasure. I look back at the photos and I just remember how small the kids were and how much fun it was. And these moments were of us together as a family that, I think these are the moments that count for me as a mom. So this shore is different from the other shore that we were on in our last episode. It was very sandy. This side of the Keweenaw Peninsula, the shoreline is very rocky. And so a lot of people go hunting for the agates and Yooper lights. And so we were walking along and just looking at the different rocks. And I don't know, I'm not really a rock person, so I didn't really care a whole lot. But Christopher picked up a rock that was shaped perfectly like a little egg. I think it's probably the size of like a quail egg. He still has it. He loves it. It's on his desk. He'll tell you more about it. But I especially really love this picture because Daniel was very excited because he found a rock and he went to go talk to Daddy about whether or not he could keep this rock and put it in his pocket like Daddy had taken his egg rock. And the look on Daniel's face is just like he's so excited to have his own rock like Daddy. So it's one of my favorites.
Daniel, do you still have that rock?
I don't think so. I don't remember what it looked like. That was quite a while ago and I was pretty young. I might have it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I prize that little egg rock. It's the best rock.
So the sun was setting. It was just a lovely walk. And it's beautiful. The Keweenaw is just beautiful. And this is little Daniel.
With a big stick.
With a big stick. Yeah. Like I said, this is probably one of my favorite walks with the kids that we've done. Being out in nature, seeing the plant life and what was in the sanctuary, and then being together as a family and seeing the sunset over the water and how, I don't know, idyllic it was that evening.
Yeah, this other side of the peninsula, I really appreciate the waves and the rocks. It's a little bit more rough and tumble than the sandy shore. So each side kind of has its own beauty to it. And now that we've shared kind of the highlights of this trip, we'll finally get to talk about the sauna and the rental that we experienced. The rental was small, humble. It was more kind of like a studio. We all crammed in there. It had a kitchen, dining area, living room, and beds all in one big shared space. So it was kind of fun for a small, young family. It had a bathroom but no laundry. It was stocked with books for the kids to read and various board games. And one book that we discovered, and I think it was Nala's first time to read through it, was Tall Timber Tales by Jingo Vitalavashan. And I think she's read through a few of her books several times.
Yeah, this was back in the day. I mean, I still do this, but this was back in the day when I read anything and everything. But Tall Timber Tales was especially entertaining. It was about Jingo's childhood, growing up years in the UP. So it's just a book of interesting little stories and memories she has, written in a humorous way. You know, she's a bit of a character, so it was entertaining to read.
So it's kind of like backwoods Finnish humor, right?
Yeah.
So that's the rental. Now we'll finally get to the sauna. So the sauna was a little bit of a walk from the rental. The house was more inland and the sauna was right on the water. When you come out of the house, there's a path through the trees. It went down a little bit towards the water and then to the sauna. The sauna had concrete walls, and it took a while to heat up because of all that concrete, which I don't think I realized or understood what that entailed when heating up the sauna. So I was still doing a lot of heating of the saunas in the UP. And I think I told Christopher I would do this one, but I just felt like I couldn't get it hot enough. I remember being really frustrated. And I think it was because of the concrete walls and I didn't take that into account. The first time we sauna'd, I believe it was in the evening and it was dark and it was a little windy.
Yeah, I think it was pretty windy.
And the waves were coming up onto the shore. And as the waves receded, the water went over the rocks. It made just this really interesting sound. I don't even know how to explain it. It sounds like those sticks with the rocks in them when you turn them upside down. And
Rainmakers.
that's what it sounded like. And it was very windy. And I think it was a little scary for me because it was so windy that first night. You can see it's just a beautiful shoreline. And I believe this sauna might be the closest one to the water. So if you look up and down the shoreline, there's really nothing that I can see in terms of buildings. So going inside, there's a changing room, pretty good size, lots of places to hang up towels and wood. And it has a candle window, which is always nice because it lets light in, but it isn't necessarily harsh light.
The wall in the changing room, one of the walls, you can see a little plaque that has sauna rules. They're fairly common. I see them in a lot of different saunas, but I think this was the first sauna that we had seen one of these, so we had a lot of fun reading them out loud and repeating them over and over again.
So going into the hot room, the concrete walls on all four sides. Well, actually, I don't know that black one. Maybe is that concrete? I don't know. And then a couple of benches. There's a stove with the hot water tank that says keep full of water, which we tried to. And it was nice because they had a hose in the hot room that we could just access that water super easily. I had Christopher mention earlier that our rental had a bathroom, but not a laundry. And I had him say that specifically because we had to do laundry in the sauna. I had to wash clothes. The kids had dirty clothes. So the girls and we used the hot water from the hot water tank. We took our dirty clothes down there, washed them in a couple of bins, rinsed them with the water, and then we used the heat of the sauna to dry the clothes. So the next morning we went and most of our clothes were dry. So that was the first time I'd ever done laundry in the sauna, and it worked pretty well. And I think, with how fast-paced our life is in culture, sometimes making us slow down and do those things, those tasks of washing our dishes by hand, because there wasn't a dishwasher there. We were washing our dishes by hand. We were doing our laundry by hand. I think there's something about that mental break that you get when you're doing those physical tasks that I think added to the whole week and sauna and UP experience. Something about just slowing down, forcing you to slow down. So this is called Sauna Cabana. I think that's their name for it. The owners call it that because on the roof of this building, you can actually go up and watch the sunset. They also had a room where you can relax and play games. There's a kitchen, a sink. So the girls and I had a fun time watching the sunset and taking a few fun pictures. Becca had her little kid's camera and got to take a few pictures of that. I think you enjoyed that.
Yeah, I enjoy photography, and that sunset was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, on this trip we got some of the best pictures of the water and the sky and the sunset, or different times of the day, the morning, the evening, the night.
Yeah, and all those hairs flying in the wind. Yeah, I think every sunset was beautiful. Every night. Pinks, oranges. It was incredible. Thanks for driving around the Keweenaw Peninsula with us today. Next episode, we head east to the central part of the UP near Republic, which is in the Michigamme River Basin. Christopher's brother, Greg, and his family joins us there, so come back next week to hear their thoughts on our adventures and the sauna that we used there. If you haven't yet, join our locals community and say hi. It's free to sign up. You'll get regular updates from us. If you enjoy our content and would like to support this podcast, Locals has that option as well. The address is thesaunatrail.locals.com. We appreciate all of our supporters and fellow sauna hounds. Our podcast can be found on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and other streaming platforms, as well as our website, thesaunatrail.com. New episodes release Saturdays, which is the traditional Finnish day for sauna, also called Sauna Päivä. We hope to see you on the Sauna Trail.